The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Close your eyes. Picture a writer at work. What did you just picture? I bet you pictured somebody alone in a room, hunched over a notebook or a laptop, maybe chewing on a pencil, maybe pulling her hair out, perhaps nursing one neurosis or another. That's not what the writing process looks like for a Music Row songwriter. Those folks show up at the office with their lunch bags. They go into a room with 2 or 3 people. They throw around ideas, play guitars, maybe argue a little bit. And when they leave the room a few hours later, there's a new song in the world. Sometimes they do it again in the afternoon. I thought it would be fun to hear from one of those writers, so I called up my friend Joseph Patton, a staff writer at Sony on Nashville's Music Row. In a business where unabashed commercialism is the order of the day, Joseph is one of those writers who's figuring out how to do the work with love and integrity. Joseph Patton, thank you so much for being on the Habit Podcast today.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, and so Joseph is a songwriter in Nashville. Which company are you mixed up with?
Yeah, mixed up with is a good way to put it. I'm at Sony ATV, so a big giant behemoth of a company.
Yeah. So, Joseph, a few weeks ago, I had Christopher Williams on the podcast talking about, I think you probably know Christopher. He's a singer-songwriter.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we got on the subject of the way, this podcast is all about people's process, so obviously we were talking about his process. But Christopher, like some of the other songwriters, most of the other songwriters I know, is a guy who mostly writes for a record. Like he's got a record coming up, so he writes the songs, mostly by himself, sometimes co-writing, but a lot of kind of goes into a room and writes, by himself, and then comes out, doesn't throw away a lot of songs because he's not writing every day. He's just kind of writing for a project. And we got on the subject of the sort of the 10 and 2 writer, the guy who has a writing session at 10 and a writing session at 2 and is just cranking stuff out all the time, and is also writing way more songs than ever get recorded. And we thought it'd be interesting to have somebody on the podcast who that's the way he does it, because it's a very different process from what Christopher does, or what a lot of singer-songwriters do. So the first 10 and 2 guy that came to my mind was Joseph Patton. Is that a real phrase? Is 10 and 2 guy a real phrase?
No, I actually have never heard that, but I knew exactly what you meant when you said it, but I'd never heard that before. Because it really is. It's more of a, but some people call them lunchbox writers. That's might be more closer to what you're hearing, just because people who pack up their food for the day and they go in, much like a construction worker or something else. They just go in and put in their time and then come back out, which is very unromantic and but that's basically what I'm doing every day. And 1 to 2 sessions a day. Doubles can be pretty draining if you do a lot of those. But I write a song. Basically, I'd say the average is about 7 or 8 songs a week.
Wow,
is where I'm currently average right now. And some people hate that and think it's the worst idea ever. You talk to different people and they have different opinions on it, but. Yeah, currently where I am in my career, I basically get together with someone once a day, and a couple of days a week it'll be twice a day.
So, just tell me. Can you just tell me what a day in a Music Row songwriter's life looks like?
I can tell you. Well, everyone has different ones, but but mine. Most everybody, you're going to laugh at this, but most everybody on the row in that world, they start around 10:30 or 11 a.m. So, which is hilarious. And I can hear everyone listening to this saying, "Well, that must be nice." But I've got 2 kids, and so I usually am up way before that. And my day, I can only speak for myself, but my day usually starts with I write and read before I go into those sessions, just to get my brain kind of primed and ready.
Uh-huh.
And then a typical song session goes, 4 to 5 hours.
Oh,
and
okay.
on long days, I'm going, 11 to 3, 11 to 4, and then turn around, doing it again, writing till 7 or 8.
And so
that's on a long day. But a lot of days I finish at 4 or 4:30.
And at the end of that session, are you expecting to have a song?
That is the hope, and that is what happens probably 80 to 90% of the time. Yeah.
Wow. How many people are in the room?
Typically 3. It's 2 or 3. I've a few times it'll be 4, but usually you have Music Row likes to operate. It kind of changes over the years, but the current trend is they like to have an artist in the room, a track person, basically a person who makes the sounds and the beats, make it sound like a finished product, and then a lyricist type person in the room, or an idea type person in the room. And the hope with that is the 3 of them combined can make a song with your powers combined. You can make these 3 things happen.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of times the hope a lot of times is you get people in the room to kick around the ideas, and when they kick around those ideas, a lot of times they're just hoping that something sparks. The idea with an artist in the room, though, is that's one step closer that the publisher doesn't have to make, because if the artist loves what's being made in the room, then he doesn't have to be pitched the song because he wrote it, and that way he's more likely to cut. He or she's more likely to record that song.
Uh-huh. So that's more of a commercial concern than a creative concern.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
Most of the time, yes. That's the commercial concern. Yeah.
And and I guess it probably varies how much the artist is contributing to the
It is that is a mixed bag. Every day is the thing that is great and also difficult about it is that you really don't know what's going to happen every single day. And especially in the first year of my deal, it was, let's throw these people in a room and see what happens and see if they can figure something out. And then you kind of slowly start building up your camp and your repertoire and your people that you do work together well. People you work well with together, and people you don't work well with together, and start building up the relational part of it.
Yeah, and that was something I was going to ask you. So you often get put in the room with somebody you don't really know.
Yes.
But you're saying that happens
very often.
That happens less and less as you go on, or? Or you still?
Yeah, I mean, it does once, because what the hope is that you, it's like, it honestly is kind of like a blind date. And, and the funny thing about dating is, on paper, these two people should be able to write a great song because they have more thoughts or approaches to a song. And so you can put those two people in a room, and much like a date, they seem like they would work well together on paper, and they get together and it's just awful. And the same way, you could put two people in the room that have nothing in common, but for whatever reason, they work really well together. They just bounce well off each other. So it is a little bit of a crapshoot sometimes. But the hope is, as you get further and further along, people, at least in the Nashville world, like to say that you're building up your own camp, you're building up your own tribe, and it's kind of like classes. So you come up with your class. And the freshman class comes up together, and they eventually become juniors and seniors. And they may write with freshmen and sophomore, but they've kind of established their crew, and it becomes a little bit. I don't want to say clique sounds a little negative, but it becomes a little bit cliquey. But you're coming up with your class on the row, and that's how you build the. And at the end of the day, what I do like about it is that it is a relational. It is very relational. The setup of it, it's a long-term investment in the relationship, and so you want to get songs that are good with people that you care about and that you like, and it's not just necessarily get with the most talented people, because that doesn't always yield the greatest results. And it's interesting too, because a lot of times, I'll just say this as an aside, like the hope, especially for younger aspiring writers, is you kind of think, I think this is kind of goes across any creative platform, but you kind of have this hope that if I could just get in a room with, whoever the great songwriter of the day is, or if I could just, sit with the great author of the day or whatever, that'll somehow, I'll be able to glean, or some of their greatness will rub off on me. And that's, I've been in rooms with a lot of people that I've idolized for a long time, and that's just simply not the case. I mean, it might be great, but it more likely than not, that's not how you're going to get better necessarily.
Why not?
Well, you have plenty to learn from that person, absolutely, but you get better by figuring out what it is that you do well, and figuring out how you can help make that. How you can make a song better. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to figure out how to make the best song you know how to make. And if you're going at it from, let me figure out how I can get the most hits possible, it becomes, you start chasing your tail a little bit.
So, okay. So if can you tell me more about what you mean about that, about the idea of chasing hits? How is that counterproductive? It is your job, isn't it, to write hits?
Absolutely is. And it becomes it's very interesting, and what I'll say is that chasing a hit. How do I say this? That's like one of the things that we're constantly doing. You are trying to figure out, how do I write the next thing that's going to connect? But everybody has a different idea of what that is, and a lot of times you'll hear people say nobody exactly knows what they like; they just like what they like, and it's hard to predict that. Well, one thing I'll just say this too: if you're chasing something that's on the radio right now, the lag time between when a song is recorded and when it's put out. If you write a song today that sounds like something that should be on the radio right now, then most likely, it's not going to be on the radio, because that's 2 years from now that it goes on the radio. And by then, it's moved on to the next sound and the next thing. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to write the song that's ahead of what's happening right now. And if you're chasing right now, you'll always be 2 years behind.
It takes 2 years for a song to make it to the radio?
I mean, it just depends on who cuts it and who records it and all that kind of stuff. But absolutely, unless you're writing with let's say I write a song with Tim McGraw today, and he says, I'm going to record this and put it out next month. And then even then, it might still take a while before it becomes a household song. You know, it's very, very slow turnaround majority of the time.
Yeah.
And so you're actually, so chasing becomes the kind of thing that is problematic because you're just always going to be behind.
Yeah.
You're always going to be trying to make something sound like that. What we're trying to do actually, and something I think is great about this is instead of chasing, trying to figure out, okay, what needs to happen next? Like what does this market that I'm writing for need to hear next? Mm-hmm. What's not happening right now? What holes are not being filled? And it's tricky because in the vein that I'm sort of, or the how do I say this? Not the alley, but kind of the avenue that I'm cutting out for myself, or trying to cut out for myself, is as a writer, is there's one person told me once that there's two kinds of writers. There's two kinds of songwriters. There's those who write songs to help you forget, and those to help you remember.
Wow.
Which I love.
Yeah.
And I tend to write songs that are more geared towards trying to help you remember something than trying to get you to forget something. And songs that help you forget are much more popular on the radio. They're going to get more. They're going to fill up the stadiums, and they're going to, they're going to sell more tickets, and they're going to sell more beer.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to the radio right now, that's the those are the songs, because at the end of the day, you're trying to get songs that help people, at least in the country market, help people forget about the stress of their job or the stress of their life or whatever, and go enjoy being entertained for a few hours. So yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But all I have to say, those songs that help you remember are few and far between, but they also, I think, are, they last longer, and they always have a harder journey. Some of my favorite country songs over the past 15, 20 years are songs that make you look at the world a little differently, but they also, they're not going to make you raise your drink in the air, but they are gonna, maybe make you call your mom or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't
know. So, all right. I love that distinction between songs to make you forget and songs to help you remember.
Yeah, me too. It just changed. I love that too.
And it seems to me that, Music Row, or commercial, let's just say commercial music, has the reputation of being A, formulaic, B, manipulative,
yes.
C, viewing the audience as, let's just say, a fishing ground to be harvested rather than loving the audience. And it sounds like you're talking about a way, unfortunately it's not going to yield a hit after hit after hit, but you're talking about a way of loving your audience, perhaps.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's my co-writers would say, would echo this. They would say, there have been plenty of rights that you can go in where the goal is let's pull the wool over people's eyes. Yeah. And no one would say it quite like that, but yeah, hey, people that are listening to this are not as smart as we are, so let's write it that way. And first of all, it's not true. But second of all, nobody, you can smell in any form of writing or whatever else, you can smell that from a mile away. I mean, the second that someone's pandering, and again, that's my own opinion on it. There's definitely people that say you can. Here's the thing. I don't think that someone likes a song that maybe you think is stupid or that I think is stupid. I don't think they like it because they think that its artistic integrity is incredible. They like it because it reminds them of being on the lake, or because they like it because it reminds them of working on doing something with their dad when they were 9. There's certain things about it that a lot of times when we're the musicians who are too precious are kind of, musicians can be a little bit too precious about it. But I'll say this though, that when you're trying to love a listener means how do you give someone what they are used to, but also give them a challenge as well. And that's a very difficult line to, that's a very difficult balance to strike.
Yeah.
But I'd also say if you're writing a song, I would say it for the sonnet too, or anything else. Like, you can write a million different sonnets, and there's that certain formula that you have to operate within those bounds. But those bounds create something amazing when someone actually pulls it off in a way that is like a magic trick.
Yeah.
And I would say that with the country thing, there's something, and I write, I'd say probably 70% of my writes are in the country world, and then the other 30% are in the pop and singer-songwriter world.
Okay.
And across all three of those, there are basic, some forms of basic structure that you're operating within.
Okay, yeah. Can I interrupt you for a second and ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you talk about the conventions and the expectations that you work within, and you compare a country song to a sonnet,
yes.
In the sonnet, those conventions tend to be formal conventions, right? The number of lines, the fact that you have a turn after line 8 or after line 12.
12, yeah, sure.
But the sonnet doesn't necessarily limit you in terms of content. Like there are some conventions, some content conventions. Seems to me in a country song, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have both formal conventions. Needs to be a right link for radio, whatever. But are there content conventions that you have to live within?
I see. So that's great. Certainly operating on what what you hear, on the radio is, I can reference, I don't know if I'm allowed to reference, right now, number one this week, I guess, or probably last week was, or getting ready to be number one, that song, Long Neck, Ice Cold Beer Never Broke My Heart. Beer Never Broke My Heart is the name of the song, right? That's
all right.
That song has been written 6 ways to Sunday.
Yeah.
And content wise, it's the exact same thing as you've heard a million times before. But for whatever reason, I happen to really like that song. I think it's really well done and does it in a little bit of a different way for whatever reason. But you may hate that song.
I've never had the pleasure.
It's you can look it up after this.
Yeah, I will.
It's just a giant, stadium anthem song that might make you cringe or might make you think, oh, okay, I get why this works. But that song, I'll say it this way: what I'm doing in a write every day, if I write that song, nobody believes it. So there's something that I think about that song that the guys that wrote that song, that actually is part of, how they operate on a daily basis. Okay. And the one thing that seems to not work is I always tell people this in the room, that if I write a song about a fishing pole in the back of my pickup truck, nobody's going to believe that. People are going to see right through it. You have to go back to what you know and write what you know, and then figure out what you know and what the Venn diagram is of you and what you know overlapping with what this particular market needs to hear. Is there something that they're missing that you can bring to them? And so to circle back to subject matter, there really are 5 or 6 subjects that any song is about. I mean, you can talk about the vehicle of getting there, but songs have to have conflict, and they have to have love or loss or heartbreak, and they have to have some sort of something that does the person get what they want or not in the song? You know, those kinds of things have to happen in every song, I think. And there's certain things that get on the radio that don't have that, but I think the songs that actually make it and move the needle have those basic elements, just like any great story has those basic elements. I'm kind of throwing the Joseph Campbell book at songwriting a little bit too, you know?
Yeah.
I think that it has a lot of, at the end of the day, the way that I experience heartache may not be the exact same way that someone else in, you know, Arkansas or Nebraska experiences that thing. But where, you know, how can you love thy listener? I've heard you say that before. Like, how can you love thy listener, even if you haven't done the exact same thing as them? Where's the overlap between what you are and what they are?
Yeah. Yeah. A question I always like to ask is what can you give the reader, or in this case, the listener, that they can't get for themselves?
Right. Great. That's a great question. And surprisingly, one that is not asked very much, or maybe it's not surprising you, but it's not asked very much. What, you know, people are always talking about being yourself, except for when it's, you know, being yourself in the writing room, except for if you be yourself too much, then that's a little weird. Don't do that. So, you know, it's kind of being very comfortable with, and I feel like I have a lot of different things to say about this, but, you know, going into the write, knowing ahead of time that most of the time when I'm going into a write, if I go in and say, you know, every time that I go, right before I go into a write, if I think, well, I either have to write a song today or I'm a nobody, then the song's going to be terrible, and the people in the room are gonna suffer for that.
Yeah.
But if I go into the room and I say, at the end of the day, songwriting is not who I am. You know, I the fact that I belong to the Lord means that songwriting is not going to be my base for existence. And for a lot of people I'm writing with, it is the base for existence. It's a vehicle to give you your identity. And I know any writer can identify with putting your identity in that. Yeah. But, you know, and the trick that I heard a long time ago from the Presbyterian Pope, Tim Keller, he said, how did he say? He said, you know, there's a verse, I can't remember where it is, but he says, the verse is, he who by Christ is made righteous shall live. And he would always do the negative of that when he was struggling with idolatry. So he'd be like, yeah, he who by preaching is righteous shall die.
Wow.
And so for me, it's walking into that room and saying, he who by songwriting is made righteous shall die. Like, that has to be my kind of mantra before I walk in, or else I'm gonna die, and the people around me are gonna suffer. And my job too is, you know, if you're interviewing a lot of other writers and artists, there's a lot of difficulty of like them having to figure out what it is they want to say and how they want to say it. And my struggle is more, and my gift, and not my gift, but the thing that's my joy, but is also difficult, is most days I'm writing with an artist and they don't know what they want to say or how they want to say it.
Yeah.
So my job becomes way more of a service industry job. How can I make you sound the way that you want to sound, look the way that you want to look, and also push you to say something that's interesting or meaningful or can bring joy or something like that. You know, it becomes it's a pretty rich and rewarding thing if you can actually pull that off.
I guess so.
Get someone to say, you know, get someone to.
You have so many layers of audience in your line of work. You know, I've kind of got readers, and you've got. I mean, you know, you got to hit a couple of layers before you ever get to the listeners. Before you get to the listener,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of darlings that you have to talk. You know, there's a lot of people that I have to talk to that have to go through before a song even gets to. If I don't write a song for an artist, for example, it's got to go through dozens of years before it gets to the artist to even consider if they like the song.
Yeah. Dozens of ears or dozens of pairs of ears?
Dozens of pairs of ears.
Okay. One thing that I've been thinking about as you've been talking is the extent to which people, if you were writing to give people what they want, you've already got a problem because people don't know what they want. And
man, it's just so true.
And what people end up loving is when I didn't know I needed that, but I really needed that. I didn't know I wanted that, but I really wanted that. And that's also a big difference between chasing the hit and just trusting that if I just say something that's true, eventually this is going to find an audience.
Oof.
But we still have, I mean, the main thing I wanted to talk about, which we're about to run out of time without talking about it, is the fact that you write, so you said 7 or 8 songs a week? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and some of those you have to circle back around because you didn't finish the first time. So some of those are song finishes and things like that.
So let's put it down to 4 or 5 a week.
Sure.
You're not getting 4 or 5 songs a week on the radio, I don't think.
No, it's songwriting is literally the worst average in any profession that I know of. It is absolutely, if you are killing it in songwriting, then if you are absolutely, let's just say that I wrote 160 to 75 songs, 175 songs probably last year in 2018.
Okay.
Probably 10 to 12 of those were seriously considered. Maybe 5 or 6 of those, I'd say probably. I think I had 5 or 6. Let's see, 7, 8. I had 8 cuts last year. Now, granted, I'm early on in my sing, but I would say to someone who is killing it, someone who's got 40 number ones and is just killing it. Talking about a person who's written probably 25 to 3,000 songs and has had 200 recorded. They're going to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Those odds are terrible.
Yeah. So
if you're batting 300, you're no one bats 300.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know what the question is. I mean, how do you do it? I guess is the question.
Oh, just put them all in the dustbin of history, or
yeah.
What?
I mean, how do you show up for work the next day to say, I'm going to do this again? It's probably never going to see the light of day, but I'm going to do it again.
Man, great question. I could throw that right back at you, honestly. But my process is I've got to get 10,000 words to get to that are worth anything, and that's my own process. Everybody doesn't operate like that, but doing it every day is the short answer is because the writing is the thing. Mm-hmm. What happens after the song is born is completely, 98% out of your control. Yeah. Maybe someone who's at the top of their game who knows every artist in town and every person in town that they need to know to get the song to them has 2% control. Uh-huh. But at the end of the day, what I have not control or what brings joy is the room. Yeah. Being in a room with people and figuring out and tripping, stumbling through the dark, and all of a sudden someone lifts up a rock and says, look what's under here. And all of a sudden there's a song, and it's magic every time. Yeah. Even a bad song is magic. Yeah. It's like pizza. You just can't really have bad pizza. And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And not to say that I feel like that every day. There's certainly days where you just feel like you're just kicking the rock to the end of the lane. That's kind of what you feel like you're doing. But sometimes, you show up and it's magic, and that's the thing that I like the most. And I'm so much more relationally driven that writing a song on my own, I've done plenty of that, but there's something really, really magical about stumbling onto something with someone else.
Yeah, that's great.
That doesn't happen when you're writing a novel, I don't think.
Yeah. In the movies...
I've never written a novel, though.
Yeah, right. Well, in the movies and TV, when they show a writer, they always show somebody sitting in a room by themselves. Sometimes they're looking out over the sea, which is always funny to me.
Right. Right. There's always anguish. There's blowing up black balloons in the corner.
That's right. Yeah. And it surprises. It seems like the only writing that would be worth showing on television would be those writers' rooms like you're in. You know, that seems like that would be really interesting to watch in a way that watching somebody look out the window and chew on their pencil just isn't that interesting to watch. But they do it. Like they are. I mean, sometimes you'll see like a comedy writer room on a show, but I don't know why. Did you ever see the show Nashville? Did they show writers' rooms in that show?
I watched it a little bit, but I don't. It's all so sensationalized.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. There's no.
Yeah, but
you just only see.
Yeah, you
few pieces of it.
Yeah, right. Early on in this conversation, you said something about it seeming unglamorous. Your kind of work, but I don't know. That seems like some of the most glamorous. Yeah, I'm thinking about the conflict that probably takes place. I mean, is there conflict? Like when people have a conflicting taste and interest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, absolutely. There's always and people. Well, we're terrible at conflict. I have very rarely been in a room where, it is so delicate. Mm. The room is so delicate. I was, without sounding just ridiculous, it's the closest thing I've ever been into besides being with a counselor.
Wow.
That feels like a counselor room, as far as not that you're getting the advice or the guidance, but that there's that much
that kind of intensity,
potential for intensity, a potential for somebody, so you have to be able to walk this line of, can this be a room where people are comfortable enough to say what they really think? Mm-hmm. And also, can this be a place where people want to, and are willing to suck very badly? Because you're going to say, like, nobody can be awesome all the time. Mm-hmm. And the writing room is a great place where you can, if you think, if you watch the show Nashville, that you walk in and all of a sudden you just click your heels and and you've got this amazing thing. And it's like, no, it's really, really grueling. People say lots of really dumb stuff. And like, how many times have I said something and been like, oh, that's just, maybe you guys maybe you don't hate that idea as much as you hate me, but like maybe you hate both of them. It's just very, it can be very delicate and very, so how can I, as a songwriter who's not putting their name on the song to sing in front of an audience, how can I ensure that this person feels completely comfortable to say what they want to say, and also say something very stupid and it not be met with, well, I guess you're not as good as everyone says you are. How do you get someone to be very trusting and open about what they do and how they want to say things, and yet still inspire someone to make something great.
Wow, I'm sorry we got to that point so late in this process, because I want to hear more about it. But I've got to wrap up with one last question. This is a question I try to finish up with, and that is, who are the writers who make you want to write? And that can be either songwriters or other kind of writers.
Oh my gosh. Writers that make me want to write. That's a great question. And songwriter wise, I mean, there's definitely people that come to the top of the list. Tom Douglas is a big one that people throw out all the time, but he's legit, man. Tom Douglas is really great. This guy named Tony Lane, he's also, they're both at Sony, actually. They're both songwriters that I see walking the hallways that I've looked up to them for a long time. I would say people that make me want to write. I think Jason Isbell is another artist guy that I really like what he does. He's pretty great.
Yeah.
And then like books. That's the way that I have to. That's the way I write songs. I have to devour books in order to write songs. So I would put, whatever I'm currently reading right now is probably things that make me want to write. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, man. Well, Joseph, thank you so much. I love hearing you talk about writing and songwriting, and it's been great. Let's do it again sometime.
Thanks for talking with me. It was a good time.
Yep. See you later.
The Rabbit Room has partnered with Lipscomb University to make this podcast possible. Lipscomb has graciously given us access to their recording studio and the Center for Entertainment and Arts building. We're so grateful for their sponsorship, their encouragement, and the good work they do in Nashville. Special shout out as well to the Arcadian Wild for allowing us to use their delightful song Finch in the Pantry as part of this podcast. Check out their album of the same name for more excellent music.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
This podcast was produced by The Rabbit Room, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to fostering Christ-centered community and spiritual formation through music, story, and art. All our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com, and to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.